With winter upon us, there's no better time for an engineering miracle to battle the increasing flood levels in various parts of the world. As sea levels rise drastically due to an age-old adversary, global warming, Venice is drowning. China is exploring a new form of surface drainage called sponge cities that may or may not work. New York is getting more vulnerable and investing billions to save the city. Texas is defending its coastline with a hefty budget. So many extreme ideas have been presented to solve the dangerous flooding issues. However, only the most radical flood defense strategies can make a difference. Here are some of the biggest flood defense tactics of the century. Starting with Venice. Why is St. Mark's Basilica using glass barriers to protect that part of the city from flooding? And what happened to the $7 billion flood defense project that was completed in 2020? Venice is known for its scenic views and peculiar architecture. It is one of the most traveled tourist sites around the world. However, Venice has a huge flood problem and is currently experiencing the worst flood in 50 years. To put things in perspective, Venice was built on a lagoon, and its early foundation was mostly clay and wood until modern methods of architecture were applied to fortifying the foundations with rocks. The periods of high tides from the Adriatic Sea, often called acqua alta, usually caused serious flooding in Venice, and to tackle this problem, a 10-kilometer sea barrier was built. The $7 billion project was a network of 20-meter-wide mobile gates that was installed on the floor of the sea at Lido, Chioggia, and Malamocco inlets. The metal gates were planted on massive concrete casings, which were forged on land, and then installed into long trenches at the bottom of the sea. When tides begin to rise, the gates are controlled to rise above the sea level, blocking the incoming flow of water, thereby stopping water from flowing into the city and causing excessive flooding. When the tide drops, the gates descend back beneath the sea to allow ships to move freely. The project was called Mose, which held a secondary meaning to the biblical representation of Moses parting the Red Sea, and it protected Venice from tides as high as 3 meters. The Mose has had its successes and drawbacks, but here's where things go south. Climate change greatly evolved, and the disaster scenarios that the Mose was designed for are now outdated. The tide often goes above the levels that the Mose planned to cut off, so the inflow of water into the major areas of Venice can cause problems for businesses and mobility. The city raises the Mose when the tide gets as high as 110 centimeters, but it only protects about 86% of the city, while the rest remains submerged. Recently, the city had to adopt the use of glass barriers that are 5 meters long and 1.3 meters high to stop the water from flooding historic buildings and landmarks. The glasses are seated on concrete which extend 2 meters underground. The glasses work with pumps and other devices that enable drainage. This design is only a temporary measure to mitigate flooding until a more sustainable system is put in place. The glass wall can stop 1.1 meters of water and appears to be more effective than the Mose. This is because the Mose is expensive to operate and the barrier does not stay up all the time. The Mose costs about $320,000 in power generation and manpower of about 80 people to manually operate. Interestingly, the Mose is still under construction and will be completed sometime in 2025. Next is China's Sponge City plan. China is one of the most populated countries in the world, with over 100 large cities and developing infrastructure. It has an excess of landmass and a wealth of culture. But you know something else China has? A lot of rainfall and storms. Because of this, flooding has become a major environmental challenge. In 2020, about 50 million people were affected by the flooding of rivers and high-volume rainfall. The government devised an innovation to purge the city of the massive accumulation of rainwater. This idea was the creation of sponge cities. Sponge cities are a new urban construction development used in the management of floods while strengthening ecological infrastructure. The idea of a sponge city involved the combination of advanced drainage and treatment systems with green areas. Various countries have attempted the concept of sponge cities, but China has fully adopted the idea and launched massive changes in the design of ground surfaces. The aim is typically to create a system that allows cities to absorb, store, and reuse rainwater. thereby migrating floods and drought in various parts of the country. Many Chinese cities use traditional drainage systems that channel rainwater into rivers and seas. However, the goal by 2030 is for all urban areas to meet sponge city building requirements. Chongqing. Chongqing is not only the largest city in the world, but also China's pioneering sponge city with a population of 16 million residents. It has more wetlands, gardens, green spaces, and nature strips with very limited floods and improved biodiversity. China is scaling up its sponge city plans with 16 cities and 30 metropolises chosen to take part since the program was launched in 2015. According to the State Council, 80% of the areas should be able to store and reuse 70% of their rainfall. The cities are equipped with a special drainage system that stretches for several kilometers. The sloped funnels filter water into the ground. Sponge cities also consist of permeable roads, designed with materials that allow water to pass through its material. Materials such as polyurethane binders are mixed with stones or gravel to create a surface with small cavities where water passes through. How much water can these surfaces absorb? Some areas can absorb 4,000 liters of rainwater per square meter every hour. That's a lot of H2O. The absorbent material also sieves out debris while storing the water for repurposing. Despite the hard work and ingenuity, China has also experienced major challenges with its sponge cities. Sometimes the structures fail to stop the occurrence of floods. For instance, on the 24th of July, 2021, one of the cities in China, Zhengzhou, experienced a typical annual rainfall in 4 days. This led to serious flooding and hundreds of people lost their lives and properties. The city spent well over $7 billion upgrading its flood defense systems in vulnerable areas. But sadly, the upgrades didn't make any difference. People began to question and criticize the efforts of the government, but Chinese officials replied by explaining how severe these storms were compared to the previous ones and emphasizing that it would have been nearly impossible for any city anywhere to manage the extent of rain that they had endured. Experts had also analyzed the Sponge City projects, saying that the design is meant to tackle light and moderate rainfalls and not extreme disaster-type floods. So while the Sponge City strategy can be quite effective, areas of extreme rain may have to look further into applying other strategies alongside to make it work. Of course, this would require a hefty budget. Talking about ridiculously large budgets, how about the billion-dollar plan to save New York? New York City has taken many hits in the past from the effects of climate change. During high rainfalls, the railways and streets are flooded, showing that the infrastructure on the ground isn't designed to accommodate the inevitable. Many parts of New York are vulnerable, especially the Lower East Side of Manhattan. The government is on the search for a sustainable solution to the watery chaos. This new multi-million-dollar innovation consists of a series of ideas, such as flood barriers, elevating parks to create runoffs, and building seawalls. But to do this, they must do the unthinkable: destroy some parts of Manhattan. Battery City in Manhattan Island has a budget plan of $220 million to redesign key areas such as Wagner Park, which is a 3.5-acre green land built for leisure. The park will be demolished to make way for a new structure, which will be raised from 3 meters to 6 meters above sea level. Another structure is the colossal flood wall, which will allow residents to have access to more space. The project will also include an enhanced drainage system, tide gates, concrete structures, and landscaped areas with elevated seating that would act as water barriers. These ideas and more would help to fortify the neighborhood against rising sea levels and save lives and properties. According to reports by the National Ocean Service, sea levels are predicted to rise by a foot or even a quarter meter by the year 2050. So to combat the effects of climate change, many more ideas are required, including building seawalls, planting trees, designing floating cities, and other extraordinary ideas. If you think the New York plan is expensive, how about the $31 billion seawall project to save Texas from flooding? Yes, Texas is investing hefty sums in defending its coastline against flood disasters brought about by climate change. The huge coastal wall project, nicknamed the Ike Dike, is part of a grand plan to protect Texas coastlines as well as the endangered Galveston Islands, which has taken multiple hurricane hits since the 1900s to date, destroying lives and properties in the process. The project will comprise of a series of huge gates and barriers with man-made dunes and beaches that will connect the entirety of Galveston Island and Bolivar Peninsula. In the middle, there will be a pair of gates measuring 200 meters, installed to link 3 artificial islands for ships to move in and out freely. Whenever there is a huge storm, the gates will be sealed against the Gulf of Mexico. These plans are just for the coast alone. There are also contingency plans to protect the city itself. These plans include flood walls, highway gates, drainage systems with pump stations, and more. This project will not only protect Galveston, but also other large oil companies, refineries, and areas of economic importance. Projects like these are undoubtedly essential, considering the damages that these areas have endured in the past and the growing problem of climate change. The future will be determined greatly by an effective flood defense plan that is sustainable and efficient. Which of these projects do you think will be most effective in the long run? Let us know in the comments. And if you are not subscribed to this channel, you're missing out on a lot of valuable information. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Until next time.